Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Secrets of the Night Sky. This is a new series. B'ezrat Hashem, we will be going through this topic for the next 14 weeks together. Sometime, we'll probably end it sometime at the end of Nisan, right before the summer or the spring months, or around that time. Now, the truth is that whenever you prepare a series of classes, you try to spend some time understanding the subject matter. You want to get really comfortable with it. You want to have some level of expertise in it. This is one of those things, as a rabbi, I don't feel like I have any expertise in. I'm not an expert constellation guy. I'm not an astronomer. I can't tell you about all the constellations. And therefore, I'm trying to approach this topic with two different angles. One angle is giving you a Jewish perspective and giving you the information that is buried in the sources, and hopefully, giving you some information that gives you an appreciation to how to understand the Zodiac, the night sky, and this concept of mazalot, right? At first, I was under the impression that the idea of constellations and Zodiac is very antithetical to Jewish belief. Like, we don't believe in it. I've heard the idea, and you may have as well, that en mazal Israel, that the concept of mazalot is the antithesis of any kind of Jewish faith. And what I found was surprising, that all of the early rabbis, the Rishonim, the rabbis that lived between the 10th century and the 15th century, were experts in astronomy, experts in understanding the celestial spheres moving around the earth. And the question is, why did it stop? So you could argue that it stopped because of Galileo and his deeper understanding of the science of the constellations. It could have just stopped because we were able to demystify so much of those things, and it was no longer as predictable. And I have a theory behind why things have changed a little bit. Now, you know that the Earth is in a solar system. And our solar system is made up of 9 planets. Some say it's 8 planets. We have a dwarf planet called Neptune now. And that solar system is revolving in a cluster in a galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is one of millions of galaxies and something called the universe. Now, we know the Earth is moving, and we also know that the solar system is moving, right? Everything is moving. Now, the truth is that we do know that whatever we see in the night sky is not the same sky that people observed 1,000 years ago, and certainly not 2,000 years ago. That when they looked at the sky, they saw a different set of stars. Now, I don't know if you know this, but if we fast forward into history for 5,000 years from now, we won't see any of the stars anymore in the sky. The sky will be completely black because everything is moving away from us. What they saw 2,000 years ago was much closer. They were able to see more than we can see. And I have a suspicion the reason why we lost so much of that wisdom and knowledge is because it's so much further away from us. Now, we believe that God created the universe. We believe He created the world. What are these signs telling us? Why do we look at them? Why do we go back to them? Now, the simple explanation is like this. God creates a material world for us to have something called free will. Remember, the word olam comes from the word ne'elam. The world, the earth, is hiding a truth. This material stuff that we have, this materialism, the physical world around us, is designed to give you something called free will, bechira. That free will allows you to choose how you want to express yourselves in this world. More spiritual, less spiritual, more balanced, less balanced, whatever it is, you got to do you. Okay, but there's a system in place that allows us to develop ourselves as human beings. That's what Torah. The word Torah comes from the word hora'ah, which means instruction manual. It's there to guide us to become a better version of ourselves. And therefore, when we look at the physical world, our rabbis remind us that the physical world is an expression of what's happening on a spiritual plane. So when we see and when we perceive the world around us, the world around you is there to tell you something. Is it an accident that there's that warm feeling we have when the summer months come around? And that cold feeling that we have maybe even a little bit of sadness and depression when the winter months come along. How many of you notice how dark it is in the morning when you get up and how that makes you feel? There's a feeling with time. The word for time in Hebrew is zman, right? Zman is also is also a hazmana. It's also an invitation. Time itself demands something from us. Now, the Jewish understanding of time is different than most other systems. We have a solar calendar that is overlaid onto a lunar calendar. And therefore, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar together are telling you different things. The solar calendar is a monotonous march through time. Most of the ancient world believed that time was very cyclical and you couldn't break out of that cycle. There were certain cycles that happened every 7,000 years, every 26,000 years, however you understood it. There were certain cycles that were reoccurring over and over again, and you were stuck in this like a hamster on a hamster wheel. You're going in circles and circles and circles, like Groundhog's Day. You were reliving certain things over and over again, and there was no way of breaking out of it. That is the power of Ra. Who was Ra? Ra was the name of the sun god in Egypt. And the power of the sun god in Egypt was, and maybe this is what King Solomon meant, Shum Chadash Tachat HaShemesh. There's nothing new underneath the sun. Because the sun reminds us that things always remain the same. We know that according to the Kabbalists, that the sun and the moon represent masculinity and femininity. The sun is masculine and the moon is feminine. The sun is the one that is always providing, the moon is always receiving, and that cycle of giving and taking back and forth is what allows the world to exist as we see it. Now, the sun is super predictable, right? The sun, where does it rise every morning?
East.
And where does it set?
West.
And if I were to ask you right now, midday, where would you find the sun? Right above you,
Exactly.
right? Now, if I was to ask you, where could I find the moon tonight? What would you say?
That's a good question.
That's a great question. I don't know. Right? As a matter of fact, if I asked you the same question every single month, there would be a very different answer.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Therefore, the moon represents the unpredictability of the feminine nature. Right? What's that? What's interesting is that Rosh Chodesh, right, is not like the Yom, not like the day. The sun represents the day, the monotony of time marching at a particular beat over and over again. And then you have something called the moon, the Chodesh, right, which comes from the word hitchadshut, renewal. Each lunar day, or each lunar month, has a new particular energy and power to it that is different than the sun's energy. Now, each system on its own has its pros and cons. I like the idea of consistency. The moon is consistent. It's predictable, right? But there's something very monotonous and boring of a predictable life. There's got to be some kind of change. If nothing ever changes, why should I try? We know from the stories we've been reading up until now in the Chumash that Abraham was born under a particular type of celestial mazal that predicted that he would never have children. He could never have any kids. Stuck in a particular mazal. And he was able to break out of his mazal, right, and change his nature. Interestingly, the Arizal points out that his mazal to have a child only allowed him to have a child that would live until his 37th birthday. Which is why the Arizal said that he had to be brought up as a sacrifice on his 37th birthday, and there he was given a new life, so to speak. He became something different. Again, another expression of him, Yitzchak, breaking out of his mazal. So you have the Jewish faith beginning with two individuals whose mazalot, their signs, their astrological signs, were antithetical to Judaism expressing itself in this world. And I really believe that at its core, that's what it means to be Jewish. That when you talk about Jews having chutzpah, the chutzpah of being a Jew, is exactly that. You and I should not be here right now having this conversation. There's 2,000 years of history of all kinds of interesting people trying to get in our way to completely stomp out Jewish memory from history. And somehow, against all odds, statistically for sure, there's no reason why any of us should be having this conversation. It happened again over 420 days ago on October 7th when another group of people said we're going to do something so heinous and horrible, we're going to try to stomp out Jews from the world and we're going to get everyone to gang up on us. And thank God it's failing. It failed. To be a Jew means to understand that we have to be able to break out of our nature, break out of the signs that define our lives. I think that is the secret of the night sky. The night sky tells us of the monotony of things, that this is probably where you're going to end up. But the power of being a Jew, or the power of being a human being, means that you're not defined by the constellations that you were born into. You know, we're going to go through, I don't have this for all of you here, but like we're going to go through the order of the mazalot. And then you think the mazal is just the month that you were born. It doesn't work like that. When you look at your mazal, you're looking at your particular fortune. It is not just the month. It is the month. It is where on the planet you were born. It is what day you were born on. It was what hour you were born in. It's all, and then it's the family you were born into. There's so many different layers that you have to take into account to help clarify what your mazal is. And with everything that I'm going to be teaching you, God willing, you'll have a little bit more knowledge of what are the things that influence you, why your nature is such. And having said all that, what's so unique and profound about Judaism is that we say that who cares at the end of the day? Those things have an influence on you, but they do not define you. It's very important. I want to start out with that. Like, know that there's something called mazal. It's true. And what I want to do with today's class is just go through the source that speak about the power of mazal and understanding that we as Jews believe in mazalot. But what's unique about being Jewish and the Jewish religion and its faith is that you are not defined by it. You can break out of it. So, for example, your natures are very much an expression of the month that you were born in, and your natures are also an extension of the families you were born into. There were no other set of parents that could have raised you, no other set of siblings that you could have shared your life with, no other time in history that your soul could have been born into this world, no other set of circumstances that were perfectly set up to help you become a better version of you. The problem that most people fall into, the challenge they most often have, is that they become a victim to their circumstances and they don't believe they can make change. That is worshiping the sun god. The sun god says nothing ever changes. The idea that the Jewish people were stuck in Egypt, right? The whole concept of living in a caste system is an extension of this belief of the sun. Nothing ever changes. The ruling class will always remain the ruling class. The slave class will always be the slave class. The upper class and the lower class, right? You had the patricians, upper class, and the plebeians, the lower class. All of ancient society broke into two classes. The caste system was a system that was actually born out of Egypt, that later the Indians kind of adopted as well, right? You're going to be a cobbler your whole entire life. Not only you, but everyone before you and after you, and so on and so forth. We as Jews reject that. You can become something more than that. And this is why I believe the first commandment the Jewish people received was the mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. The first commandment that the Jewish people got was not to know there's one God, not to keep the Shabbat. The first mitzvah, the first commandment the Jewish people received when they left Egypt was, you can go ahead and declare the new moon. Why? If I'm going to take a group of people that have been indoctrinated into believing that it's only the sun and nothing else, you're stuck, you can never change, you're an abed, you're a slave, right? The first mitzvah is to teach them of hitchadshut, of renewal. You can change, you can grow, you can redefine yourselves, you're not stuck. And it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, the message is true through and through. All of Judaism is a story of people that were locked into a particular set of circumstances, and irrespective of those circumstances, they were able to break out of them and become something more. That squeezing of the circumstances, the pressure that we go through in life, is where our greatness comes from. It's the perfect counterweight that we need to carry with us to become the better versions of ourselves. Okay, that's my introduction. Okay, so let's look at the sheets over here together, because God willing, I'm gonna post all these classes online. You'll find them at youtube.com/Chazak, and I'll have these sheets up there as well. So if you don't have the sheets, or if you're listening, the sheets will all be in the description below. Okay, the bright to the mazalot says as follows: the Holy One, blessed be He, created 12 mazalot and arranged them, and their hosts, their arrangements, and their battalions in the heavens, and they are as follows: Teleh, Shor, Teomim, Sartan, Aryeh, Besula, Moznaim, Akrav, Keshet, Gidi, Dili, Dagim. These are the 12 mazalot, are arranged in the heavens. They serve in the 12 months of the year. All we just said is we're talking about the ram, the ox, the twins, the crab, the lion, the maiden, the scale, the scorpion, archer, goat, the water pourer, and the fish. or Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, and so on and so forth. Each month has a Hebrew name with it. It has a particular scientific constellation, a set of stars that express a particular image of something, right? You have a tribe, a shevet that is associated with each month as well. You have a camp direction. Each camp had a particular direction that they were facing. You have an element with each month as well. Each month has one of the 4 elements that are assigned to it. Each month has a Hebrew letter. Each month has a particular planet that is expressed by that particular month that it faces. And each month has a particular hour of the day that it represents. And all these things together define what your mazal is. Right? The mazalot, number 2. The king, blessed as he created these 12 mazalot and arranged them in the heavens to inform all those who come into the world of his might and to inform of his mighty grandeur in order to express that which is written. The heavens tell over, etc. And other nations of the world who bow to the sun and to the moon and to the mazalot and to all the hosts of the heavens, what is said about them? They will be destroyed. But this is not the case with Israel. Rather, they serve and bow to the master of everything, the creator of heaven and earth. Why are all the other nations of the world going to be destroyed? Why do you got to be so fatalistic? Why can't you just be nice? And I think that what the real message of this Baraita is teaching you is that if you live in a world where you're unwilling to try new things, you have no future. You see, time works in 2 ways. Most of us think of time in a linear way. Okay, so you have time moving like this. So this is day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. So this is the 4th of July in 1776. The next year, in 1777, that July has no connection. We're moving away from that moment in time. And therefore, there's no connection between this moment in time and this moment in time. Just sharing a date in time. But we know that the earth itself is moving in a cyclical cycle. And therefore, when we think about time, we understand that there's a linear movement of time, because that's what the sun represents. But there's also a cyclical nature in time. So we think about time in a helix. So imagine you have a helix. This is my helix, okay? This is my illustration of a helix for you. You have time running in a circle. So you had your July 4th moment over here, or your Pesach, Passover happened over here. And now we're moving away from this moment in time. We're not moving in a linear way. We're moving this way. In a spiral, or in a helix, okay? And you're moving away from this moment in time, but every single time I cross over this Passover moment on this section over here, I'm reconnecting to that moment in time. Which is why timing is everything. What time does Pesach start? On the 15th of Nisan, right by sundown at 7:47. Does it really matter if it's 7:47 and 7:48? And the answer is yeah. If you want to be able to tap into the month of freedom and the power of freedom, there is a particular time where it starts. There's an initiation process. And every single year when we pass through that particular month of Nisan, the month of Aries, okay, we are reconnecting to the whole power of that month, right? So all he's saying is that if the nations of the world are stuck in a linear process of time and they're unwilling to change anything because that's their nature, right? They have no future. And by the way, I could prove to you that it's true. How many nations tried to stand up against us? There are no ancient Greeks today celebrating, their culture or their history or their gods. There are no ancient Romans today celebrating ancient Roman, whatever their holidays were. There are new things that people have tried, right? New ideas, but everything that is old is gone. How many people on the planet today can point to ancient traditions that are exactly the same, with a set of moral principles that haven't changed? Imagine for a moment if I was to take you on a journey, and I could have this special device. I say, clap my hands a few times, and now we're in my time machine. And we can go back to any time in history. And I asked you, okay, I want you to choose a moment in history where you could go back and feel comfortable with your current set of moral principles, your current set of guiding principles. Where would you go in time? Where would you go in an ancient culture and feel comfortable with their values? And it's not just because you're Jewish. Even if you weren't Jewish, most Westerners today, if they were to look throughout the ancient world, the only place they could find a culture that shares a set of values with them that is still relevant in the ancient world would be ancient Israel. You'd go to the temple of Solomon, right? You'd go to Shlomo HaMelech's Beit HaMikdash. They weren't sacrificing young women to deities and slicing their throats and their wrists like they did in the ancient world of Greece or the Incas or other ancient cultures, like in Egypt, right? When other nations of the world were, involved in all sorts of barbarism, all sorts of, depraved moral behavior, King Solomon was singing King David's psalms and offering incense to God in the temple. Very different, set of values. The Jewish people in the ancient world were thinking about how we could create peace. They were thinking about how we could go ahead and educate the world. We were going to take a whole entire class of people that were completely disconnected, slaves, and elevate them into aristocrats. The Torah says that you're supposed to become a mamlechet kohanim, a nation of priests. You don't find that anywhere in the ancient world. In the ancient world, you don't share priesthood with anybody. It's for a select, small, wealthy, upper class people. No one else can get in. You can never get in. You're always out. But anyone can become a Jew at any time, and you could have access to almost everything that everybody else has. You all have the ability of becoming priests. You have the ability of becoming as knowledgeable as anybody else. You don't have that anywhere around the world. Does anyone know where the public school system came from? Do you know who invented it? Ezra HaSofer, when the Jewish people were exiled out of the first temple after the Purim story, he brought the Jews back from Babylonia, right? And he created a public school system to re-educate the Jewish people, free education for everybody, men and boys and girls. You can never find me one place in the ancient world where women were educated like men. Doesn't exist. Anyone know what the name of the oldest university in the world is that's still functioning today? Anyone know? Most people think it's like, Oxford, but that's a mistake. Oxford is only 800 years old. There's an older university that's 1,400 years old, and it's found in Egypt. It's called El Azhar University, started by Rabbi Eliezer. The oldest university on the planet. Universities, the whole, what?
It's Jewish?
It's not Jewish anymore. But it was started, the whole concept of going to school they kept the name, El Azhar. It's Eliezer. It's Eliezer University, oldest university in the world, right? Still in existence today. The whole concept of education as being a bedrock of a society, that we're called the people of a book, that we take the transformative ideas, and we implement them. That's a very deeply Jewish concept. And that's how we believe we change the world. By educating people, by reminding them it's never too late to learn, keep learning, keep pushing, finding new ideas, find inspiration. Don't be stuck. But when you're stuck in that cyclical nature of time, it's very easy to become cynical. Right? Anyone here watch a great movie called Groundhog's Day? Right? Bill Murray, right? So, the premise of the film is very simple for the people that don't know what I'm talking about. There's he wakes up every single day and it's exactly the same day. It's Groundhog's Day. And he's stuck in the loop and he can't get out of it. Now, it's funny, right? But the truth is, most people feel that way. Like nothing's changing. It's always the same. And if you feel that way, know, okay, I don't like to use this word, but I'm going to use it, that you are in the grips of the Satan. You are in the grips of the evil spirits. It's nonsense for you to think that things do not change. It's a lie. It's the biggest lie. You are born from stardust. You have in you potential that is beyond anything in the universe. You understand that? Do you believe that? That you can change, that you can grow at any point in your lives? So, the nations that will cease to exist are those that think they can never change. They don't have a future. Okay? To be a Jew means that you believe that anything could change at any moment. We are always have hope. Hope can never be destroyed. And this is what the Chumash says in Devarim. This is what Moshe says. Ushmartem v'asitem, you shall keep them and do them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding in the eyes of the people, who will hear all the statutes and say, quote, only this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What is Moses talking about? That the people of the world will look at the Jews and say, wow, those people are really, really smart people. Okay. So this is the Gemara says. This is a conversation in the Gemara in Shabbat. How to understand this verse. So you have Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. Okay, Rabbi Pazi ben Pazi says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said in the name of Bar Kapra, anyone who knows how to calculate the astronomical seasons and the movements of the constellations, and does not do so, the verse says about him, they do not take notice of the works of God, and they do not see his handiwork. Meaning, if you believe that God created the world, right, don't you want to see his fingerprints? Don't you want to see where he's doing that? So when you look at nature, and I want you to know, I have like a bio major. I was a pre-med student of many moons ago, and it was from looking at the world, at the universe, that I found God. You see so much precision, so much perfection, that the sun itself is a cluster of one of the smallest molecules in the universe called hydrogen, and there's so much of it in that area that the pressure of all that hydrogen is collapsing on the molecule itself, squeezing the atom, creating billions and billions of nuclear explosions in the sky. That's what a sun is. Do you understand what that is? The biggest thing in the universe, a sun, is made up of the smallest things in the universe. You are made up of tiny little things called cells. Each cell is a robot that has a particular set of programs of how they're supposed to behave. There's a difference between the cells in your skin and the cells in your eyes, and the cells in your heart, and the cells in your lungs, and the cells in your bone. Everything about you is made up of small little tiny things. And the craziest part is now that we know that each cell has something even smaller inside of it called a DNA strand. There's so much DNA in one human being's body that if I was to unravel your DNA, I could make a rope 20 times going from the earth to the sun, back and forth, back and forth. That's how much DNA is inside of you. And each DNA is a perfect structure, a perfect set of code that tells the body how to make you you. You don't see the fingerprint of God there? So back then they didn't have the ability of looking into small little things of those kinds of details. They had to look out. We have the micro, they had the macro. So how did you find God in the old world? You looked at the heavens, you're like, holy cow. Now you go back to the watchmaker analogy, right? You never saw a watch before. And I say, come with me, we're going to go on a trip. And we walk, and we're down at Brighton Beach. Okay, and we're walking down Brighton Beach. We're at Astroland, and whatever it's called right now. And we find this thing called a watch. I'm like, wow, look at this. And I pick it up, and I say, okay, well, what do you see here? You see this little thing? It goes on, it looks like you could wear it, right? It's got a face on top of it. There are these, fonts on top of it with these, different dials going back and forth, something moving. We open it up, and there's a whole entire perfect clockwork engine moving, and so on and so forth. Now, there's several assumptions we can make because we've never seen a watch before. Assumption number one is that it must be that the crashing waves, millions and millions of years of crashing waves onto the beach, okay, created all these things and put it together, right? Would you believe that? Would you believe that the ocean somehow was able to create a watch? And the answer is no one here in their right mind would ever believe that, right? They say that one of the reasons that the universe came into existence because if you have enough time, an infinite amount of time, if you had enough explosions happening over and over again, eventually life would emerge on its own. Right? This is an argument that scientists make today. If you were to go ahead and have, we know that that's not true. We know that the universe is only, they argue today the universe is about 15 billion years old. The Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. And if you have enough time, eventually you'll have life emerge on its own. That's one of the arguments for the emergence of life, which is ridiculous. So they say that if you take all the parts of a Boeing 747 and you put it into a room and you shake it up enough times, eventually you'll have a Boeing 747. And my retort is always, would you fly that Boeing 47? And the answer is no. So obviously when you see a watch, the reason why it's so obvious to you that the ocean didn't spit it out is because there's too much perfection in there. There's too many perfect things aligning, allowing you to do whatever it does, right? The same is true when you look at the universe around you. Do you know that you can fit exactly 90 moons between the Earth and the moon? If I was to take a moon, I could fit 90 moons between the Earth and the moon, right? Did you know that I could take exactly 90 suns and place them between the Earth and the moon and the sun? How did that happen? You know that we're the only planet in our solar system that can have and experience a solar eclipse the way that we see it? because of the perfect distance between the Earth and the Sun, the Moon and the, what's that?
We have one, but other planets have more.
Yeah, no, and we're the only planet, by the way, in the solar that only has one moon. No other planet has one moon. We're the only one that has one moon. But none of them can have a solar eclipse in the way that we have it, because the distance between the Earth and the moon is so precise that the size of the moon, right, and the distance to the moon is the exact perfect measure that allows you to block out the sun completely. You will have partial eclipses in those places with all kinds of weird things happening. But the idea of having this perfect celestial moment where the moon is able to block out the sun is a uniquely Earth experience. You can't have anywhere else in the solar system. That the whole of the universe itself is perfectly fine-tuned, that if the Earth was a half a mile closer to the sun, there would be no water on this planet. It would all be vapor, a half a mile. If the Earth, by the way, was a half a mile further away from the sun, there would be no water, it would all be ice. That you can't have life without water. That we're in the perfect distance. That is not an accident. You couldn't just explode into a perfect place. There's too much precision, there's so much fine-tuning. So according to Rabbi, who's it over here? This is Rabbi Reuven Pazi. He says that if you have the ability of finding God's fingerprints, you have a responsibility to go ahead and tell people, teach the people. Which means that if we have a responsibility to teach our children how to find God in the world. Unfortunately, we don't do this in our education system anymore. Okay, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, from where is it derived that there is a mitzvah incumbent upon a person to calculate astronomical seasons and moons and constellations? And it was stated, and you shall guard and perform it for your wisdom, understanding in the eyes of the nations. That was the verse we read before. What wisdom and understanding is there in the Torah that in the eyes of the nations, appreciated and recognized by all, you must say, this is the calculation of astronomical seasons and the movements of the constellations and the calculation of the experts of wisdom by all. Which means, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he says that as Jews, there's a mitzvah to learn about the constellations. There's a positive commandment because the nations of the world appreciate the wisdom that we have from understanding and explaining these things. Now, we know now, this past Columbus Day was a very interesting Columbus Day because about 3 years ago, there were researchers in Spain that went to Christopher Columbus's tomb and extracted DNA from him and extracted DNA from his son. Now, I always suspected he was Jewish, right? But never had any real evidence because two things happened. Number one is when Christopher Columbus was, when he died, he instructed that his children burn all of his books. All of his diaries, everything was destroyed, which is a weird thing. The other thing that was very strange is that there was these two strange letters on the top right corner of his writings. And it looked like a bet and a dalet, right? A bet and a dalet. We write today bet samach dalet, which is an acronym for b'siyata d'shmaya, right? So he didn't do it, he had his own unique code. And he had his own unique things that he often wrote into his writings, which sounded very, very Jewish. Now, when he came to Ferdinand and Isabel in 1492 to get permission to sail the Atlantic and cross the Atlantic, he was looking for money to actually pay for the expedition. They said they would pay for it. After the war was over, they said, sorry, we're bankrupt. Two Jews in the room, one by the name of Rabbi Avram Senor, who was the chief rabbi, who actually made the shidduch between Ferdinand and Isabel, hoping that relationship would find favor with him because he was the shadchan, and that would protect the Jewish people. Boy, was he wrong. Okay? He ended up converting to Christianity, actually, before he died. All his children married Goyim. Now, he was in the room when Christopher Columbus made that petition to Ferdinand and Isabel. There was one other rabbi in the room at the time. Anyone know his name? The Abarvanel was in the room. So Abarvanel and Avram Senor, two great rabbis. The Abarvanel was the chief financier / accountant of the king and queen. And he had he was a court Jew, and he had a tremendous amount of political clout there. Now they knew already when Columbus was coming in around December time that they were planning on exiling the Jews. They were planning on exiling them sometime in January, in the winter. And Rav Avram Senor and the Abarvanel convinced the king and the queen to push it to Tisha B'Av. So the Jews would see it as an omen to do Teshuvah, right? So they knew they had 6 months of figuring out what to do with the Jewish people. So sending Christopher Columbus, they went to Christopher Columbus, and they said to him, we're gonna pay for this. We have the money to pay for your expedition, on condition that you go back to the king and queen. You found the money, but we are not subjugating these new lands to the law of the king and the queen. Because the law was going to be very soon that no Jews could live under on any Spanish land. So Christopher Columbus's sail was filled with Jews, right? I forget the name of his chief, astronomer, because you need to have a guy who understood the sky to figure out where you are with location. There was no GPS. You had one guy who could read the stars and figure out where he was, right? He was 100% Jewish. That's that?
Didn't they have a sextant at that point, though?
They had, I don't know what they actually had, but so much of because that side of the world was never navigated before, they didn't know what they had to expect, right? So they went out and they found the new world, and it's why so many Jews came over. For example, we know now that Hamilton, right, went to his mother's name was Rachel. She converted to Judaism. And from a halachic perspective, he was 100% halachically Jewish, even though his father was not Jewish. Why? Because Rachel got divorced. She was first married to a Jewish guy. She got divorced, and she remarried someone who was not Jewish. Now she sent him to a Jewish school in the Caribbean. Do you know that the oldest synagogues in America are in the Caribbean? The oldest mikvot on this side of the world are in the Caribbean, because the pirates of the Caribbean were all Jews, right? Fighting against the Spaniards for exiling them. Now, all of this is, I'm sharing all this because when the Jews left Spain, there was a massive brain drain. The Spanish Armada, one of the most powerful, and Spain itself, one of the most powerful countries, within 30 years became the weakest. And at the same exact time, the Ottoman Empire became the most superpower. Why? Because the people who had all the knowledge and the wisdom of the stars and how to navigate the world all left Spain and moved to the Ottoman Empire. And that's what this pasuk is talking about. The way in which we inspire the world is by pushing ourselves to become the individuals that understand the world with the most clarity.
Can you say what we're doing now?
What are we doing today?
Yeah, how do we really stand out?
Oh no, I agree with you. It's a problem right now, but that is for another class. That is definitely an issue. No, I'm sharing it because I'm saying it's a problem. I don't think we're doing that anymore. I don't think we're first anymore. We're not first anymore. We're still, thank God, there's still enough Jews that are able to, win Nobel Prizes. We're doing it, and we're not doing it enough. We should have controlled, the narrative at universities. Why don't we produce more, rabbinical professors that are teaching at universities, like history and sciences? We've lost all that, and unfortunately, a lot of I'd say the more religious circles have shown away from all academia, which is a mistake, right? In the old world, those fields were dominated by Jews. Every professor was Jewish in the old world. You couldn't find a non-Jewish professor. And not only that, you went out of your way to find a Jewish professor. You wanted a Jewish guy to teach you everything. Just like today, you want a Jewish lawyer to defend you, because if you were assigned a non-Jewish lawyer, you're going to jail. So or you needed a Jewish accountant, because we know those are the best. So you want a Jewish guy investing your money, because they still have that today. But it's all about money, and it's no longer really about academia. It's not about wisdom. It's not about truth seeking anymore. And that's what we've lost a little bit. And God willing, I think we're going to get back there in time. Yeah.
And I just want to share, somebody interviewed, I read this from J.P. Morgan's book, Mr. Morgan. He said, billionaires do not use astrology, but billionaires do.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another lady.
They're using a higher level of consciousness, yeah.
Yes, and there's another lady. This happened not too long ago. Her father passed away.
Yeah.
And they burned the body, and she
Yeah.
said she wants to do a favor for her father.
Yeah.
So she asked permission from the owner of it's an institute that owns a very, very high-powered microscope.
Okay.
It's the latest and the greatest microscope. He said, I just want to see what's in the DNA or what's in the ashes of my father. And everybody was shocked, because it showed, when they developed the picture, it showed the galaxy. So it's really true that we all come from
the stars, yeah. So there's actually, there's a book, I forget the name, his name is David something. He wrote a book called The Signature in the Cell. He was the head of the Human Genome Project. A Jewish guy, not religious, and he was there. He was one of the first people. Remember, Bill Clinton signed that law where you spent like $1 billion figuring out how to map out the human DNA, and today you can do it in an hour with some saliva. But that took us 10 years to map out the first human DNA. So the guy that ran the project, I just don't remember his name right now, he wrote a book called The Signature in the Cell, and he speaks about how he found God when he found the DNA. And he speaks about the sequence, ready? That each cluster of DNA, it comes in a cluster of 10, 5, 6, 5. Now, that's a total of 26. Let's go, like, ready? Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey.
Stephen Meyer.
Do you hear that? Stephen Meyer, yeah. Stephen Meyer. But he's not Jewish. There's another guy that Stephen Meyer quotes in that book. That was anyway. So you see that even in the DNA today, you find elements of God's fingerprint in there. Okay, anyway, Rashi says, in the eyes of the nation, this refers not merely to the knowledge of astronomy, but even to our knowledge of astrology as the wisdom used predicted the overall events of the year. We're supposed to be forecasters. This is what the Mishnah says. Ezu hachacham, who is the wise man? Haroeh et hanolad. One who sees how things will unfold. Right? You have to be into forecasting. Targum Rav Yosef on the next page. Page number 3. So valuable is the science of the descendants of the tribes of Yisachar were appointed to the council of the king because their aptitude in this field, based on their information and national decisions, were often made. The people that had information of how to understand and interpret the stars could see how things would unfold. For example, if you remember in the story when the Jewish people were leaving Egypt, Pharaoh says to Moses, "You're crazy if you leave right now. There's a red star that is following the Jewish people, which is a sign of blood. You're going to die. You're going to kill all your people. Do not leave." And so Moshe looks up and he's like, "Holy cow, he's right. Actually, according to the mazalot, if the Jewish people leave right now, they're all going to die." So he prays to God, and God says, "Don't worry about it. We're going to turn that star, that blood of death, into the blood of the Brit Milah, making a change. We're going to change the mazal. We're going to use it for something else." So when you have the ability to read the stars, understand the science of things, you have the power of making choices that lead to the best possible version of the self. Genesis says as follows: Ki barecha barecha arbea arbea ad zarecha. I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants numerous as the stars of the heaven and the sands on the seashore. And your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean? Why is our blessing somehow tied into the stars of the heaven and the sands of the seashore? So there's two different understandings of this. Both of these things are very far from us. There's no way for me to influence the stars. There's nothing I could ever do to crush the sand. These are things that are eternal from our perspective. But the difference is that when you're a star, you're shining your light down on humanity. Okay? Nothing can change that. The sand isn't going to be destroyed either. You're eternal, just like the sand. But the difference is that when you're sand, you're low, and people can step on you. Two different expressions of what it means for survival for Jews. Are we going to be like the sand, or are we going to be like the stars?
But there's other symbols. There's the footprints. You burn sand, it becomes glass. But there's a whole thing about footprints, right? Even Christians quote that.
Many years ago, I just officiated my 232nd wedding a few weeks ago, and I've been asked to do some really strange things at a chuppah. So there's two that are most notable. One is I don't know. There's a company apparently that sells frozen butterflies. Are you familiar with this?
Okay.
You can actually buy frozen butterflies, and butterflies don't die when they're frozen. They go into this weird cryogenic state, and what you do is the Chatan and Kala had both parents were passed away, and they wanted me to speak about their parents. So after I finished it, they bought 300 butterflies. Each person under their seat had an envelope. No one knew what was inside. It was a butterfly. And you take them out of the freezer and you put them in the envelope, and it takes 45 minutes for them to thaw. Right? And then under the chuppah, they had like another 300 butterflies. This is an outdoor wedding in the summer. as the sun was setting, and I finished speaking, and I said, now we're going to speak. Unleashed, everyone opened up what's in your envelope, and as they opened up their envelopes, these butterflies, so like 600 butterflies, flew out in the area. It was like really cool, and it was a symbol of like rebirth and renewal. Right? I don't recommend it. Okay, number two. Second thing that I did, which was interesting, and just reminded me of the sand, is that there's this each one wanted to take two different color sand, right? And they poured it into a vase. So you had like red sand and like white sand, or green sand and blue sand, and you poured it into a vase. And in the same way that the sand you could never pull out one grain of sand from the other, their lives would be forever intertwined like the sand. It was so cheesy, but I had to do it anyway. But I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because I don't want to do it. But I did it anyway. So yeah, there are all kinds of symbolism behind all kinds of things. True, but the difference is that these are ancient sources that are talking about them. So the Breita number 8 says each of the constellations represents an outline made by its stars. Not only are these illustrations pleasant imagery, but as Chazal teach us, each image symbolizes some underlying essence of a particular region in the sky. God uses each constellation as means through which to issue his power and influence into the world. The word for face in Hebrew is panav or panim, right? How do you say inside? Bifnim, right? Panim or panimi. So the face, the panim, also describes the panim, what's inside. So when we look at the world, the universe, the constellations, we see the panim, so to speak, we see God's face. But if you understand it, you also understand the panimi, the inner essence of things. And that's why the study of nature and science is so important for us. The Ibn Ezra says, by ancient Greek times, 48 constellations were widely accepted. Though later, after traveling to previously unexplored latitudes of the Earth, more constellations were discovered. Emulating the ancient astronomers continued to divide the areas by sky into new constellations. Later, astronomers further divided into ancient constellations, smaller ones, and to ensure even greater accuracy. So as time moved on, we have a more and more accurate understanding of these stars. Ibn Ezra was a genius, and he says number 10 as follows: a phenomenon called the precession of the equinox. Does everyone know what that is? The precession of the equinox. So in a nutshell, if we know that everything that we see in our night sky has to do with the Earth rotating, right? The Earth itself is rotating from north to south on a 90-degree axis. So when we think of the Earth, we're thinking of it like just spinning around like this. But really it's spinning around like this. It's got a wobble to it. So it's wobbling. And therefore, depending on where we are, every 26,000 years, there's a new North Star that we're pointing to. Okay, I think right now we're pointing towards Polaris. Okay, so the precession of the equinox is in that the way in which the Earth wobbles around has to do with how we perceive all the stars around us, and therefore its rotation itself will change in time. I have an app on my phone, not today, but in time, I'll pull down the projector. It shows you where all the stars are, all the constellations are around us right now, and I'll do a demonstration about how to read the stars later on the series. Okay, but anyway, so the Ibn Ezra talks about the fact that there was this understanding of how how the ancient astronomers kept developing new constellations, because as their instruments got better, they had a deeper understanding of the world. The phenomenon called the precession of the equinox, essentially a wobble in the Earth's rotation, changed our view of the sun's travel through the stars. We realized we were no longer at the center of the universe. The sun no longer rises and occupies into the constellation of the month that it did in the past. It currently appears in a given constellation approximately 1 month later than it once did, which means that when you're looking at your horoscopes, know that they're off by a month.
Yes.
Every 1,000 years, the constellations shift. So right now, let's say the month of Nisan should be the month of Aries. But I've heard two different opinions. I heard one that it's forward or one that it's behind. But either way, know that the month that you're in no longer is an expression of that particular constellation. It's no longer aligned perfectly anymore. It's misaligned. Now the question is, well, if that's true, then why are we still calling it Aries? Why are we still calling it that particular month? And the answer is that what?
It would wreck our calendar.
No, because our calendar wouldn't change. We're not. I mean, all you have to do is adjust the mazalot. We're talking about the mazal. The calendar stays the same, because the calendar, from our perspective, has to do with the Earth rotating around the sun and the moon rotating around the Earth. That's our calendar. I don't care about, Capricorn and Sagittarius and all. That's irrelevant to me as far as my time goes down here. But those other constellations around us, they have an impact on us down here.
Yes.
And they have their mazalot that come down here. So what the Chachamim point out is that it doesn't really matter because the essence of that month still carries that particular draw from that mazal, even though it's not aligned. And that's how they resolve it. I don't know. I don't say these. I don't make up these things. I'm just reporting what I found.
That's why we have Adar Bet, Adar Aleph, and Adar Bet.
No, Adar Aleph and Adar Bet has to do with the fact that because we're in a lunar calendar, every single year we're 11 and a half days short of the solar calendar. And therefore, in order to align our calendar with the solar calendar, we add a month every 3 or 4 years. Right? Every 11 days, 3 years, you have a month again. So that's what he calls Shana Me'uber. We impregnate that month with another month, so we align the seasons with the actual Hebrew calendar. Okay, I want to do a little bit more, and then we'll call it a day. One more source over here. This Shabbat we could skip. This is actually interesting. Look at number 14 on your own. Skip number 15, number 16. Okay, we're on the last page. He says as follows. He says, and Paro charged all his people, saying, every boy that is born you shall throw into the Nile, and let every girl live. Okay? Rashi says, L'kol amo, to all his people. He issued this decree upon all of them as well. On the day Moses was born, his astrologers told him, today, the one who will save them has been born. But we do not know whether he's from the Egyptians or from the Israelites. But we see that his will ultimately will be smitten through water. That he will ultimately be smitten through water. We know that later Moses is punished because he hit the rock. What was the rock trying to bring forth? Water. So they knew before he was born that there would be a guy coming into the world that was going to threaten the monarchy, and his weakness had to do with water. Therefore, on that day, he issued a decree upon all the Egyptians, as it is said, every son who was born. And it does not say who was born to the Hebrews. They did not know, however, that Moses would ultimately suffer because of the water of Meribah, that he would not be permitted to that. So now you see that already in the ancient world had this knowledge of how things work. But unfortunately, with all knowledge, when it's brought down to this world, it's very easy to be corrupted, very corruptible. What I want to walk away with is as follows. Number one is that the concept of mazalot are real. And that from a Jewish perspective, the reason why we study the mazalot isn't so that we can figure out which lotto numbers to win, right? That's not why we're studying the mazalot. We're studying the mazalot because we want to understand how God interacts with nature, and B, most importantly, and we'll see this through over the next few weeks, is how the mazalot impact me as a person. Your nature. Some of you are stubborn. Some of you are very kind. Some of you are very caring. Some of you are very angry. Whatever the nature that you have, it's very much a reflection of your mazal. And I believe that through understanding the mazalot themselves, you have the ability of foresight, which gives you the power of making the changes you need to live a happier, healthier, more beautiful, more amazing life. The world changes very quickly. And, we're all going to have to go through change. But there's two ways of making change happen. One is through circumstance. And I always argue that circumstance is hard. Because if it's circumstance, it means you're not prepared for it. There's one constant that we're all changing, whether we like it or not. We're getting older. Time is moving forward at steady beat no matter what I do. My question to each of you is, are you letting your lives unfold, or are you choosing to make your lives unfold? There's a difference. And the mazalot and time is that reminder that we need to be asking ourselves, am I just letting the mazal define me, or am I choosing to become something more than my mazal? And Bezrat Hashem will continue on these themes over the next coming weeks. I have one more intro next week, and then after that we'll go into the month themselves and break down each mazal for each month and what it means and what that means for me as a husband, as a spouse, as a friend. Which mazalot work, which don't work. And again, none of these things are science. But you'll see over the next few weeks how there's a tremendous amount of truth, like eerie truths, that come out of it. It's the same way that Paro's astrologers figured out everything before Moses was born. You can figure out so much about you and the people around you based on the month and the time they were born in. Have a great week, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving. You should be grateful for all the things that we have. Spend some time being mindful of that, and God willing, next Wednesday we'll pick up.
Thank you.
Pleasure.